This is Project Cars 3, which is the next game in line of a, unfortunately, very long line of racing game delistings. Racing games getting delisted is obviously not anything new. It's usually because of car licenses or music licenses that racing games tend to have a fairly short shelf life and only get sold for really only a few years. And Project Cars 3 released in 2020. So after about 5 years, the publishers are now starting to, unfortunately, finally cut the support for this, and with that also the sales. Project Cars 3 to be delisted on August 24th, online shutdown in February, so this is still like around half a year away. But honestly, no one is really playing this game online as far as I understand. The player counts for this game, at least on PC, aren't really the greatest. Like on Steam, we're looking at a 24-hour peak of 42 players. Now, I don't think that's enough to actually find any players on PC. If you're on console, you might have a little bit more luck, but multiplayer has been dead for a very, very long time on this game, so it getting shut down in February is not really the biggest deal. You can also find this information on the official store page on Steam for Project Cars 3. It says, update on Project Cars 3, all product sales will end soon. August 24th, 2025 at midnight. Please note that times may vary by region. If you bought the game digitally, it will remain in your library and can be downloaded in the future. This is obviously the important thing. Obviously, we all still have massive traumas from the crew basically getting taken away from our libraries. This is just a regular delisting of a racing game due to licenses running out. So you can still play the game, you can still re-download it from the service if you're already on the game. This is just the ability to buy the game that will basically be taken away. Also to note, any DLCs purchased before August 24th will still be available to use after this date. The game's online modes will also remain active until February 24th, yeah, as we already said. Now, Project Cars 3 is a bit of a weird one for me, and I think a lot of other people. It really did not have a massive splash, I think, when it released in 2020. It was one of the more underwhelming releases during that year, which is saying a lot because we had a lot of underwhelming releases that year. I think it was also the year in which Fast and Furious Crossroads came out, so yeah, not really the best year for Codemasters. But was this game truly that bad? Does this game really deserve this fate that it is now, only after 5 years, getting taken offline? Maybe, kind of. This is such a weird game for me to talk about because it's a game that I don't think many people really look back on fondly. But I actually, personally, kind of enjoyed. Even so much to the point where I got all the achievements in this game. As you can see here, all 61 achievements that I got in my, at least, slightly over 70 hours of playtime. Am I proud of this? No? Was this time well spent? Maybe? I don't know. I don't know. I will be honest and say that I think for what Project Cars 3 is, it's not that bad. It's definitely not as bad as people really make it out to be. I think the really biggest problem with this game always stemmed from the marketing and how this game was pitched to people. Because obviously, as the name implies, this is supposed to be a direct follow-up to Project Cars 2 and obviously the first Project Cars as well, which were both full-fledged sim racing titles. And this game is none of that. This is, by all accounts, a spin-off in everything but name, and we'll get more. I'll touch more on that later. But needless to say that this game was a complete and utter marketing disaster. Basically, this was pitched as a title that veteran Project Cars players can play. It's just a direct follow-up. It's a full-fledged sim with, you know, all the newest physics, most realistic handling, yada yada yada. But something that newcomers to Sims can also play because it has simplified physics if you just tweak the settings more than enough. In reality, it's just a simplified Project Cars. This is basically what it is. I think if you were a Project Cars fan at the time when this came out, you were not happy with this. This is just absolutely not the kind of game that you got with this. This is, by all accounts, a simcade racing game, very much along the lines of Forza Motorsport or Gran Turismo, at least the earlier ones. In fact, I would even pitch it a little bit between Forza Motorsport and Grid. Like, that's kind of where I see this. It's not as arcadey as Grid, but not as sim-heavy as a Forza. It's really kind of somewhere in between. And I'll be honest, something in that space like, that's a good spot to be in. I think they managed to kind of get into a position where it's not falling into either of these. Like, they managed to kind of squeeze themselves in between somewhere. And I think had they just pitched it as that, and marketed as that, like, hey, this could be like your entry into the more serious Simcade races, I think this would have gone over extremely well. Now, I think in general, the only crowd I would really recommend this game to is people who enjoyed the Need for Speed Shift series, because that's ultimately what this game has most in common with. It is basically a Need for Speed Shift's spiritual successor with much better handling. The handling in this game is not perfect. I'll talk more about the actual qualities of the game later. But in general, I think this does feel very spiritual to the Need for Speed Shift games, but in some areas it actually managed to be at least a little bit better. It's kind of trading blows in a few areas, but as someone who does enjoy the Need for Speed Shift games, I also found some enjoyment in this game. It's missing some of that flair, some of that aesthetic, some of that atmosphere that I think especially Need for Speed Shift 2 had. But it still kind of manages to scratch that same itch of like mastering tracks and progressing through the game, getting faster cars, all that sort of shtick. It's definitely hitting that same, that same tone for me, so to say. And the problem is, since this game was so collectively shat on by pretty much everyone, especially Project Cars fans, I think a lot of people did not really give this game a shot in the first place. Which makes more than enough sense, considering that the veterans and the longtime fans of the series are obviously the kinds of people who would play this game first, and if they don't like it and they denounce this game outright, obviously it's going to be really, really hard for this game to draw in new kinds of people, because obviously the only kinds of opinions that these new people who are interested in this game will get and see is the opinions of Project Cars fans that don't like this one. But that obviously begs the question, is this game really that bad? Obviously, as I said earlier, like, I think as a direct follow-up, it really falls flat. But if you actually look at this game from an angle which makes a lot more sense if you look at the game, which is a spin-off, a more accessible spin-off of the Project Cars games, I actually think there is some genuine good in this game that many people have slept on. And honestly, front and center of the things that I actually do like about this game is the sense of speed, which now I know does not seem all that good right now. And I definitely do think there's something wrong with the what I assume to be FOV scaling in this game. So low speeds actually feel rather slow in this game, which you're definitely gonna notice when you start the game. You're obviously gonna be stuck with fairly slow cars, and it does not feel that fast yet. But once you actually hit some of the higher speeds, this is gonna get really, really, really noticeable. So we're currently in a Rimac, which can hit some insane speed, and as we approach the long straight on the Nordschleife here, you can see that this car accelerates really quickly. And as we hit 300, this feels pretty intense. this is pretty nuts. And like the sense of speed is like easily, when you get some of the later cars, is one of my favorite things about this game. Like, it's so okay. They're having intercourse, I think. The sense of speed was definitely also one of the best aspects about the Need for Speed Shift games, was like a massive priority in those two. And I think overall the Shift games probably still have a slightly better sense of speed, mainly because of the HUD that keeps shaking around, if you remember. It's not quite as good in Project Cars 3, but it's kind of getting there. And it's something that you'll see over and over as I go through this, is that the qualities of Project Cars 3 and the other Shift games are oftentimes very much shared, which once again leads me to believe that this is absolutely a spiritual successor of those two games. Now, another thing that I think is really, really easy to appreciate with this game is the genuinely great variety in cars and just the car list overall. So these are obviously all grouped into different sections, if you will, depending on their speed and what kind of car there is. There's some genuinely cool cars here that you really, really do not see that often in games like this. So for example, this was one of the very first cars that had the new Nissan Z Proto, which actually ended up becoming one of my own favorite cars. And this was actually, I think it might have been the very first big budget console racing game that had this car. Now, admittedly it was DLC, but it was here and it was still fairly new for its time. Now, the Porsche Carrera GT might not necessarily be like a crazy car, but if you really consider how few times you see this car these days in other racing games. It's become a bit of a rarity. Like, this car was kind of everywhere, especially in Need for Speed, for a very, very long time. But this car has kind of disappeared from racing games. But it's actually here, and it's actually a convertible version as well, which is pretty cool. I've never really seen that before. I don't know what this is. A Honda 2-in-4 concept, but it looks quirky. It looks kind of like a track toy type car. Pretty neat. The Jaguar XJ220S, also pretty nice to see. I'm not sure if the S variant is even that common. I usually like see the either the race car version of this or the regular one more often, but this is actually like some kind of sports version that I wasn't even familiar with before. And when we're talking about race cars, there's a bunch of quirky stuff here that I don't know if I've ever seen before, but looks super awesome. Like the BMW 2002 Racing looks super sick. Escort, a racing version of the Sprinter trailer, which looks super sick. Just a bunch of like quirky stuff here. Obviously, a bunch of more, common stuff that you know. It's just such a cool car list. Like there's like touring cars here as well. It's such a colorful mix of cars. Like this almost looks like a rallycross car, but fitted more for track racing. They had one DLC that was really dedicated to a bunch of Japanese cars, and with that they also brought along a lot of super, super cool Japanese race cars. I think in particular there's also some that you might also remember from Gran Turismo. You actually have a race version. I'm not sure if this is like an official one, but seeing a race car version of the new Nissan Z is definitely nice. NSX is in here as well. Nice car, because why not? And even a Mark IV Super, which I'll admit the livery looks a little cursed. I'm not sure if you can change the color on this, but it's here. V8 supercars. Like, when was the last time you actually had V8 supercars? I think all the Australians watching are probably already putting the game into the shopping cart as we speak. But they're also super cool to see. It's such a rarity, man. A Porsche 935. I'm not sure if this is... No, this is not the Moby Dick, but I actually think the Moby Dick is in this as well. We'll probably get to that later. I showed off the Carrera GT earlier. There's also a race car version of this. I'm not sure if this exists in real life, but looks super cool. And then this car I drove earlier, the McLaren F1 GTR long tail version. I'm not sure if the long tail is even applied here. This might be an upgrade you have to apply yourself. I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to see with the camera here, but also a car you don't really see too often. I think it's only in Forza Horizon these days. But even then, it doesn't quite look exactly like this, obviously. Oh yeah, here we go. I might honestly just scroll through this entire thing. This is just... Like, I could keep going here. Like, there's so much cool stuff in here that I swear I might have not even seen before. It's just... Look at this, dude. This car list is genuinely one of the coolest car lists in any racing game ever. It's such a... It's so full of variety and quirky cars and... Also iconic stuff that I honestly think you'll always have something new to drive here, and it will like truly never get boring. Group N has more stuff here that... Oh my god. R31 Skyline Super Silhouettes looks absolutely nuts. And also some classic LMP cars right here. This one especially, like the Panos Esperante. I remember this one from Gran Turismo 3. It was the most expensive car you could buy in that game. Super cool to see it here as well. And obviously, if you followed my main channel videos, the CLK LM, kind of the GOAT, honestly. Toyota GT1, also a pretty iconic car from the Gran Turismo games. And we're still going, by the way. Like, I'm still scrolling through this, and there's still more cool stuff here. You have the Sauber C9 Mercedes. Because, I mean, why not? Group A also has a bunch of cars. I think there was actually an entire racing game surrounding this car in particular, the F3 3055 Challenge. Super cool. And even some rally cars. Although there's zero rally in this game, because why not? So yeah, I think this kind of paints a picture. And this was honestly just a brief overview, like of like the more interesting stuff. There's so many cars that I didn't show off here. You can honestly just get absolutely lost in the car list in this game. There's nothing this game doesn't have, pretty much. But this also extends to the track list, which I think might almost be even more impressive. Like, if I were to just kind of scroll through all of the locations, we're still going. There's an absurd amount of tracks and locations in this game. And, like, genuinely, this is one of the few racing games where I never felt fatigued from all of the different tracks in this game. Like, this is a very, very common pitfall that I think a lot of simcade or generally, like, sim-oriented close-track races can fall into, is that you get very easily fatigued and bored of always driving on the same tracks. Honestly, throughout my 70-ish hours with this game, I never got bored at any point because there is such an insane variety in tracks. And we're not just talking like amount of locations, but also the kinds of tracks. Like you have fairly quote-unquote generic real-life tracks like Watkins Glen, although Watkins Glen is not even like a fairly common track. You have like real-world tracks here that are very, very uncommon as well. But you got Willow Springs, obviously, Yas Marina, those are very, very common. But then you also have pretty much fantasy city tracks. Like, I don't want to say city tracks because they don't really go through a city, but tracks that are just on the open road, pretty much. Then you have the Texas Motor Speedway, and I think you even have Indianapolis here as well, so basically 2 NASCAR tracks. Infineon, but rebranded as Sonoma in here. Sonoma is what this track usually goes by now. Snetterton is actually also a fan favorite British track that is not often seen in any games, but it's in here as well. And what I also think is pretty cool that this game does, occasionally you will have classic variants of existing tracks. So you have Silverstone across various different layouts, and then you have a classic iteration of Silverstone as well, which is really nice. And we're gonna see this more often later. And this is a pretty fun one here. This is very clearly Suzuka, but I assume they didn't have the license to actually put Suzuka into the game. So they made a track that has essentially the same layout as Suzuka, but they got a little bit more creative with the environment. So with the environments in this track in particular, it's a lot more grand. Like you can see that there's a bunch of mountains in the background. And I gotta be honest, I kind of enjoyed this. I like Suzuka is usually one of my favorite tracks, but it's kind of always the same because, well, obviously each racing game that wants to add Suzuka to the game obviously wants to put it in there faithfully. But this iteration of Suzuka is actually way more interesting in my opinion. Like they did a lot to spice up this track and to make it feel distinct and unique because, well, they obviously kind of had to. They didn't have the license for it. And I know there's a bunch of people that always complain that there aren't enough Australian tracks other than Bathurst in a lot of games. Here you go, Ruapuna Park. I genuinely cannot say I've ever seen this track in any other game, and I assume it's a real track. So once again, more good news for all the Australians watching. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this track name, but something tells me that this might have been a Le Mans track at some point. I really do not know. But once again, like just kind of to show that there's a bunch of super historical tracks in here, even ones that I genuinely have never heard of. You have the Porsche test track in here, which honestly for racing is kind of awful. But there are some time trials in this track as well, which is really fun. Oschersleben is also a fairly rare German track. Like, you don't really see this one in other racing games ever. And obviously, you can't miss out on the Nürburgring. The cool thing is, they actually have the GP track and the Nordschleife integrated into one track. That's also not something... I think only really Gran Turismo does this. Maybe Forza has done that in their latest game. But yeah, it's definitely nice that you have the 24-hour layers here as well. Long Beach might actually be a real track. It might be one of the only real world city tracks in this game. I definitely remember this one from the Shift games. Once again, you can educate me in the comments whether or not this track actually exists in real life, but it's here. And yeah, if you want to cause some havoc, there's also a figure 8 here, actually various iterations of the figure 8. Interlagos is also a fan favorite track that a lot of people actually really enjoy. I like it as well, maybe not as much as other people, but you get it here as well. And this is something that makes me very happy as a German. So the Hockenheim Ring is in plenty of games. It has been plenty of Forza games as well. But what they usually don't have is the classic version of the Hockenheim Ring. Like, there's such a sad story about the classic layout of the Hockenheim Ring. It's basically completely deserted at this point. Like, it's because it's just not being used anymore. It's kept in a really bad shape. So it's nice that there's a modern racing game where you can actually still race on the Hockenheim Classic version, which I think is so much better and so much more fun. There's also fairly creative locations here that I've never really seen before in, let's say, the likes of Grid, for example, like Havana here, which honestly, layout-wise, is a little bit but it's very pretty to drive through. I talked about Indianapolis earlier. There's also Daytona, so you have 3, well, actually 4 different oval tracks here, so NASCAR enjoyers get to eat good with this game. California is one of the nicer looking open road tracks as well. I think this one was actually in some of the older Project Cars games as well. I really enjoyed this track. And I think generally all of the fantasy tracks in this game can easily keep up with some of the best original tracks from the Forza and Gran Turismo series. That is my genuine opinion. And yeah, here's another one of those tracks that they, I guess, couldn't really get the license for. So instead of the Monaco GP track, we have the Azure circuit. Although this one, unlike with the other track that I showed before, that was supposed to be Suzuka, this one's held a little bit more faithfully. Like, this is pretty much spot on how you would find this track in real life as well. And that's all the tracks, or at least only some of the tracks. I obviously skipped through some of the less interesting ones. But yeah, it's an amazing track list that only gets better when you factor in that you can basically set any season on any track. Check this out. So here, for example, we have the original Fuji Speedway. Now, you can actually set up the weather on this track, and the first option is season. And you can actually change the season in this entire lane. This has a drastic effect on not just how the track looks, but also what the handling is like. It's basically the closed circuit racer version of Forza Horizon 4, pretty much. So let's just actually set this to winter for now, and also change the weather to, let's actually do blizzard here. And there you go. And this looks legit. I will admit, on some tracks, winter can look a little funky. Like, you can also enable winter and snow on tracks where it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, if you have a very deserty track or something that feels a little bit more tropical, you can also enable snow there. And that's where it can feel a little bit weird and out of place. But for tracks like Fuji, it completely transforms the entire track. Like, I've never seen Fuji like this in any game ever before. And as you can see, like, it also changes the handling. It's making my R34 slide a lot more because of the snow on the track. And I think with the vast variety of cars, of tracks, of locations, and the changeable weather you get with it, I think this is genuinely a racing game that I don't think gets ever boring or repetitive. Because you can always do something different. Like, there's a near endless amount of combinations that you can set up here that I think really, really rivals any other Simcade racer I've driven before. It makes every other Simcade racer seem so much more repetitive and bland in comparison. Once again, like, this is something that I don't think gets appreciated enough. Although I will say this might also be just a general good thing about the Project Cars series as well. I will out myself now and say that I didn't play the prior Project Cars games. I only played this one. So this compliment might also apply to the other Project Cars games. However, I think in the form factor of this game, which is a Simcade racer, this totally works. Like, you want the most amount of variety as possible as you can get with a closed circuit Simcade racer. And I think they absolutely nailed it here. Like, they nailed it so hard with the different combinations and different car varieties. Like, everything is just so well set up here. Like, it's just, I don't know if I can find the right words for it, but I hope I can get the message across by just showing off what kind of stuff you can do in this game. Now, I will admit, obviously none of that actually really matters if the handling and physics of this game are bad. And they're a bit of a mixed bag. I can imagine some people will probably bounce off of this game because they don't actually like the handling and the physics in this game. I think really the biggest problem I have with the handling is that they are a little understeery. So every car feels a little more on the heavy side, and especially some of the early cars that you get in this game are absolute understeer machines, especially some of the lower powered all-wheel drive cars. Now, this will get better over time as the cars get faster, as you will be able to upgrade the cars a little bit more, especially once you jump into some of the race car versions. This problem gets a little bit less bad, but I think the handling is definitely not the best. Like, I think I would still prefer the likes of Forza and Grid in terms of handling. It's okay though. It is definitely tolerable, and once you actually wrap your head around it, once you actually kind of understand how fast you can go around every corner with each and every car, it's something that gets better over time. It's really a matter of getting used to it, and it can be really satisfying once you nail it down and you get the most amount of traction out of the car through every single corner. But as I said, it's not perfect, and some people will definitely bounce off of it. Talking about physics though, I think the physics are great. Like the slip angle you get on the cars, and how they start to dynamically lose grip, as you can see here. And also crash physics in general are really good. So, like, if you ever get into a situation where you get to roll over the car, it looks very convincing. Like, I actually think on the physics front, this game is pretty impressive. Like, we get a bit of a jump here. Jesus. Okay, well, I think I just disproved my own point. That looks really, really fake. Maybe the physics were a little bit better in my head, okay? But they're okay. They're alright. But yeah, this actually also now brings me to a point that I didn't even have in my notes, but damage model. Like, this game actually has a surprisingly good damage model, which is so weird and rare to see for a modern racing game. Like, we're so used, especially to with closed track racing games these days, that any and all damage model is kind of confined to just fairly simple scratches and dents. But you can see here, like, the entire hood was torn off, and you can actually look inside the well, I guess this would be the trunk. But yeah, like, it's genuinely a cool damage model. Although from what I remember, the damage model does kind of depend on the car. So some cars, like the Ferraris, for example, will still have that fairly limited damage model that you're used to from other games. But then you also have cars like this one where you can genuinely tear some parts off, and it's really, really satisfying. It's cool to just generally have a racing game for once that is not like 15 years old and still manages to have a decent damage model. So if this is something that matters to you, I think Project Cars 3 does deliver a little bit in that regard. But obviously that begs the question, what is it you actually do in this game? Obviously, if this was just a quick race, custom event type game, then this would be nowhere near as interesting. Well, there is an entirely dedicated career mode that leads you through all of the major classes in this game. I'm kind of mixed on what I think about this career mode. You can see that I completed most of this stuff here, but not everything. Like, I still have a few points left. So the thing with the career mode is it appears kind of standard at first. Like, you have your themed events here, which, you know, you need certain cars for and everything. You know, this is all cool and good. The problem is that the entire progression system in this game relies on these extra little objectives here. Like, you see them on the left side there. For example, I missed to do 8 clean overtakes within, I assume this is supposed to be 2 minutes, not 2 seconds. And these little extra objectives basically determine your progress. So your finishing position doesn't actually matter all that much in this game. I think your finishing position does determine how much XP you get, and this is like the other point. You don't actually get any money from finishing events. You only get money from leveling up well, from leveling up in general, I guess. So as you can see here with the next level, I get 35,000 credits. That is how you earn money in this game. Like, you don't actually earn any money from finishing here, which is super weird. You only get it from leveling up, but you do get more XP from leveling up. You do get more XP from finishing it first, sorry. And with that, you get more money. So it still kind of works that way, but occasionally you will definitely run into the situation where you will finish an event and you will get absolutely no money, which feels really unsatisfying. And once again, like, the progression is entirely tied to these extra objectives. The actual finishing position does not get tracked anywhere here, as you can see. And this is definitely kind of annoying. This is not how it should work. It's okay because, to be honest, most of the time you will get most of the objectives here anyways, just by default. And at times it is basically just like fairly straightforward. Like, for example, for a hot lap race, you need to beat certain lap times. Or for a breakout event, which is like a fun event type, where you have to basically smash through a bunch of objects. You've probably seen this in the earlier Dirt games as well. You need to get like certain points. So I would say, like, for the most part, you will get most of these by default. There's, you know, fairly simple objectives as well, like finishing the race or hitting a certain top speed. So it's not as bad, but occasionally you will definitely run into this issue where you have to redo an event because you didn't get enough objectives throughout, like, one set of events, basically. It's definitely not perfect. The other problem you might also run into is that certain races require certain cars. And the game can be very stingy with money. Once again, this is mainly because the game doesn't actually give you any money for finishing a race, but it only gives you for leveling up, which means you will be a little bit money stuffed in this game, which in return means you have to make informed decision on which cars to buy. So the problem that I think a lot of people had when they basically played this game is they choose a class to do. Let's say, for example, they went into Road B and they want to just buy a car straight away and they just pick any car they want. That is kind of not the right way to play this game. You can do it, but that way you set yourself up for way more grinding in the future. What you're really supposed to do is look at all of the races ahead of time and then make an informed decision on which car to buy. So, for example, for this first set of races, it doesn't matter what car we buy as long as it's Road B class. Okay. For the next set of events, it needs to be a Road B class from Germany. So if we want to do any of these here, it needs to be a German car. So with that, we already know, okay, we should probably buy a German car. And then on this set of events, we see a bunch of events that require different cars. So this one, for example, requires a Corvette, but these two require a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. So this lines up with the German cars we have for the German car we had to get for this set of events. So the most logical thing to do at this point in the game is to just buy the Porsche 911 GT3 RS. Now, on one hand, this is kind of fun because you have to make informed decisions and just look ahead a little bit of time to really get the most out of each like set of events, so to say. But it kind of limits the style of play you can go for. Like, there's usually always one certain car per class that you really should buy for each of these like event sets, which really limits replayability. Like, as much as I enjoyed this game and as much time as I spent in this game, I never want to replay this game because I know I will have the exact same experience because I need to buy the exact, or it is better to just buy the exact same cars all over again. Like, the unfortunate side effect is that the career has zero replayability. However, I will say, the progression model is kind of saving it. Like, despite all the negatives, it is very satisfying to start with some of the slowest cars here in Road E, and then slowly work your way up towards faster road cars, and then eventually move on to race cars. It does have this really, really satisfying progression curve that not a lot of modern track racing games have anymore. So this kind of saved it for me, if I'm being honest. But I can definitely imagine that a lot of people do not like the career mode in this game, and that is perfectly valid. It is not perfect. Now, there was also a multiplayer mode in this game, and I gotta be honest, this multiplayer was absolutely amazing for the 1 week that it was active. Like, since the game had fairly low player counts right out of the gate, and players basically just dropped out once they realized this is not like an official Project Cars sequel, the multiplayer dried out really, really badly. But what's so unfortunate is that the multiplayer was actually genuinely great. It basically took the best elements out of various different racing games from across the years. So you obviously just have your regular quick play. We're probably not gonna be able to get into lobby, so I can show none of this off. Maybe the scheduled events. Yeah, okay, so so these scheduled events are basically, I think Gran Turismo Sport has introduced the system basically, but these events always start at a set time. So in the top right, in the top left, you can actually see my real world time. And these events all start at a set time for everybody. So everyone who wants to get in needs to be there at a certain time. If you get there early, you can do some practice, you can do some qualifying, you can, just learn the track a little bit. And then, the race starts at the same time for everybody. This actually does promote a more active multiplayer, because when you only have like a small set of events that everyone can participate to, then people are going to flock to those, obviously, instead of having their own little lobbies somewhere. But this was actually super fun, especially because these multiplayer races felt like actual events. So if you get there early, you have a small phase where you can practice, then there's a phase where you can do qualifying, and then you have the actual race, which was actually fairly lengthy. It wasn't super long, but I think each race was like somewhere around like 10 to 15 minutes. So all of these races feel like actual events with like build up and a progression to it that made racing in this game incredibly exciting. It was really, really exciting to race multiplayer in this game, and I'm glad that I managed to experience it at least a couple times before basically everyone jumped ship. Hey, it's me again from the edit. I forgot to mention one thing about the multiplayer events in this game. So you also had a safety rating and a general league rating in this game. So that basically every race, the performance, depending on your performance, your ratings either increased or decreased. Now, this is not anything new. Gran Turismo Sport had this from day one, as far as I remember. But in Project Cars 3, it actually worked really well in my memory. The new Forza Motorsport tried to implement the same system as well, and in that game, I think to this day, it still does not work properly. Like, it's extremely easy to get the highest safety rating. In Project Cars 3, it worked extremely well, and from just a couple of races and doing well in them and driving cleanly, I was able to get into lobbies with much better players. Like, I remember, in fact, I got into a lobby with I Suck at Driving at one point, and it really promoted genuinely safe and good driving behavior. It worked surprisingly well, which I did not expect. You also had a Rivals mode. This is probably coming from Drive Club, as far as I understand. But these obviously shuffle daily, weekly, and monthly, where there's a certain setup of an event. Usually it's just hot lapping, or, these are basically time-based, basically. And then you can just kind of like get in there. Like for this, I would, for example, use this Formula car here. For this, I would use this M6. Super cool car as well, by the way. And for the monthly one, we would use the M6 again. Okay, great. But obviously everyone is kind of competing here for points, and the better you are, and the faster your lap time is basically within either a day or a week or a month, the more points you get, and with that, you get a higher rank, and with that also more rewards. And obviously you still had your regular quick play lobby where you can just kind of get in and do a race, but you can also do custom lobbies here. So if you want to play with friends, you can really set up specific events, as with all the track options that I showed you earlier, which really allowed for like some crazy customization with online lobbies. So needless to say, the multiplayer was amazing for this. I just really wish it was more active, because once again, like, I think it took all the best parts from various different racing games together to make a multiplayer that I think really could have taken off if there was a more active player base here. But once again, I think partially because of how this game was pitched and partially how this game was received initially by the veteran players, there was just no active multiplayer here, at least on PC. Now, despite this game being played by what feels like almost nobody, they did actually support this game quite well with a handful of DLC packs. I think there were mainly 4 DLC packs in particular, and I think they genuinely expanded the game in ways that made a lot of sense. So I think the best one is definitely the Legends pack, which adds a bunch of classic JDMs that haven't been in the game, as well as their race car versions, which I think is super, super cool. You've seen some of these as well. But on top of that, they also added new themed events to this game. And this is something that I think so many racing games get wrong. So this is, for example, a problem that I have with Gran Turismo 7's update. It's they add cars to the game, usually not even that many. Usually it's like 3 cars maybe. And then they basically add nothing else to it. Like, it's just the cars get added into the game, and that's kind of it. Maybe you get some bug fixes along the lines, along the sides, but that's literally it. It's literally just the cars. But with the cars that they added in this game, they actually also added dedicated career sets to the game. So the cars that got added with this game, you actually got some genuine use out of in the single player. So you had a bunch of like stuff to do. I think one of these DLCs could keep you busy for like, I want to say like at least 2 to 3 hours as well. And it was generally good stuff. Like in these DLC events here, they also made use of some of the track and weather combinations that haven't really been utilized as much. So I would actually say all of these DLCs here are super worth it because the cars that they add are genuinely cool and genuinely good additions that make a lot of sense. And expand the car list in great ways, but also add content to the single player that is actually, so you can actually use these cars, which is something that so many modern racing games completely miss out on. So I think all of this sums up my thoughts on Project Cars 3. This has probably been a really long video. My recording is at 1 hour at this point. So all in all, do I think the game deserved its fate? Honestly, kind of no, but also kind of yes. They deliberately pitched this very clear spin-off as a direct follow-up and tried to sell this game as something that it really, really, really wasn't. Now, the unfortunate side effect of that is that I think the game really fell under a lot of people's radar that will have actually come around to enjoy this game. So if you are a fan of the Need for Speed Shift games, if you like Forza Motorsport, if you like the classic Gran Turismo games, I really encourage you to try this game out while you can still get it. What I will say though is do not buy this game right now for full price. So the game still costs $60, and the DLCs, which I would also 100% recommend if you can get the season pass for this, is also $35. I really, really hope that they put this game on sale at least one more time before they take it off stores. The lowest recorded price was $18, which I think is still a little bit steep for this game, if I'm being honest. So if you can get the deluxe edition, and I hope the deluxe edition covers the season pass and all the DLCs. If it goes below $20, I would say get it. I think it is definitely worth that amount of money and can still be really enjoyable to this day because once again, as I showed throughout this video, there's a lot of stuff in this game that you really don't get from other racing games, and there's enough here that you can appreciate. But once again, this is not a game for everyone. If you were a fan of Project Cars, if you are someone who primarily plays Sims, I would be kind of cautious with this game. But as someone who likes the Shift games, as someone who is just kind of generally open to any kind of racing game, as someone who didn't expect this to be a Project Cars follow-up because I didn't play the Project Cars series before, I enjoyed this just fine. Like, I actually had a lot of fun with this game. As you can see, I got all the achievements even. We can debate whether or not that was a good use of my time, but whatever. And yeah, it's a shame to see this getting taken out of stores, but it makes more than sense. No one's buying or playing this anymore. But I really encourage you, if anything you saw in this video looked interesting to you, give this game a try. Wait for a sale, and if it is on sale and you have the money, go for it. Give it a try. Worst case, just refund it. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening to what was probably a very long video. And I'll see you next time. Take care, take it easy, and as always, peace. See you guys.